Bold move or risky experiment. Google's Gemini is quietly evolving into something that looks a lot like ChatGPT's project system, and the way it's taking shape might surprise you. Gemini is working on a new projects feature inside its Android app, giving users a more focused, workspace-style way to organize conversations and files around specific tasks or goals. Instead of every chat living in one big, messy history, projects are meant to act like dedicated folders where everything related to a single topic stays grouped together. Think of it as creating a smart workspace for a research paper, a coding side project, or a business plan so your AI doesn't mix it up with your random everyday questions. But here's where it gets interesting. The way these projects are created and managed is already changing from what early hints suggested. Earlier development clues pointed to a slightly awkward setup where users might have to create Gemini projects on the web first, and only then access them on mobile. That would have made the Android app feel more like a companion than a true starting point. Now, though, the latest findings suggest that projects can actually begin right inside the Android app itself, which is a big deal for people who mostly use Gemini on their phones. This shift makes the feature feel more natural and mobile-first, instead of forcing users to jump between devices. With the newer version of the Google app, 16.47.49.ve.64, a new project button is starting to appear directly inside Gemini on Android. That's a clear sign that Google wants users to be able to start and manage projects without touching a browser. You can tap through to a Create Project screen, which gives a taste of what's coming next, but the functionality isn't fully wired up yet. In other words, the UI is peeking out from behind the curtain, but the actual feature still hasn't taken the stage. Right now, that Create Project button doesn't actually do anything, which can be a bit frustrating for anyone eager to try it for real. However, there is a key clue in the underlying text strings that reveals how Google expects projects to behave. One snippet describes the ability to add up to 10 files that Gemini can reference throughout a project. In practical terms, that means you'll be able to feed Gemini a small collection of documents, maybe PDFs, docs, or notes, and have those become the dedicated knowledge base for that specific project. This 10-file limit strongly suggests that projects are meant to corral information into a controlled environment, keeping those files separate from everything else you might do with Gemini. That can be a huge advantage when you don't want your AI to randomly pull in unrelated chats or documents. For example, if you're working on a client proposal, you might only want Gemini to use the files you've attached to that client's project, not your other notes. And this is the part most people miss. Limits like 10 files might feel restrictive at first glance, but they can also be a deliberate design choice to keep responses more targeted and relevant. Of course, that raises a big question. Is this 10-file cap set in stone, or will it vary depending on which Google AI plan you're on? It's easy to imagine Google offering higher limits for paid tiers or enterprise users. Some people might see that as a sensible way to scale resources, while others could view it as paywalling the full potential of the feature. Should project capabilities be tied to subscription levels, or should everyone get the same core power tools by default? That's the kind of debate that could quickly become controversial among heavy AI users. Beyond projects, Gemini's Android interface is also quietly being rearranged in small but meaningful ways. One notable change in the works is the possible addition of a NotebookLM shortcut in the account switcher. Currently, that shortcut isn't visible, but the underlying code hints that developers are at least considering surfacing it there. If that happens, NotebookLM would become easier to reach for users who bounce between different AI tools in Google's ecosystem, turning the account switcher into a kind of central hub rather than just a place to swap profiles. There's also a potential shuffle in how Gemini's scheduled actions are accessed. At the moment, you have to stay in the account switcher, dig into settings, and then look for scheduled actions, hardly the most discoverable path. Google appears to be exploring a move that would bring these scheduled actions into the side hamburger menu instead. If that change goes live, It would make the feature much more visible and easier to manage, especially for users who rely on Gemini to automate recurring tasks or reminders. What's important to remember is that none of these tweaks, projects, menu reshuffles, shortcuts, are fully live for the public yet. Everything is based on code that's still under active development, which means Google could ship it as is, change it dramatically, or scrap it entirely before release. An APK teardown like this offers a sneak peek into what might be coming, but it isn't a promise. Features can be tested, refined, or quietly abandoned behind the scenes if they don't meet Google's standards or strategic goals. That leads to a broader, slightly uncomfortable question. Should users get excited about features that only exist in hidden, experimental form? On one hand, it's fun to see where Gemini might be heading and to imagine how projects could change the way people use AI at work, in school, or for passion projects. On the other hand, there's always a risk of disappointment if the most interesting ideas never make it past the prototype stage. So what do you think? Should Google lean into these Gemini projects and make them as powerful and flexible as possible, even if that means adding more complexity to the app? Or should it keep things simple and avoid turning Gemini into a full-blown productivity platform? Do you love the idea of tightly scoped AI projects with file limits and dedicated workspaces? Or does it feel like unnecessary complication? Share whether you're excited, skeptical, or somewhere in between.